what does it make to see you in this movie? Well, the movie is gone, but how do you feel? The movie doesn't end the way you wanted, right? It doesn't end with you entering Gaza.
I mean, I think all of us, the three of us, when we started this film, when I left Gaza, in my worst nightmares, I thought the war would end in February. And then when we worked, when the filming was happening, I thought, okay, well, maybe April. I think the shocking thing about this war is the failure of humanity that allowed a genocide to continue for, well, it's now entering the silent phase of the genocide, i.e. the choking through the blockade. But the war itself was lasting for 15 months. And that's the part that was very difficult to accept, and still is very difficult. That humanity in the 21st century watched this genocide unfold and then allowed it to continue.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to speak about. And do we have Francesca Albanese online or not yet? Just to organize the questions. So, Dr. Al Sittah, you left Gaza after 43 days. What kind of a decision it is? I mean, just for your life, or just because you thought you couldn't do anything else?
So the last few days, so what had happened is the Israelis had surrounded Al-Shifa hospital. I was stuck at Al-Ahli hospital. It became the only functioning hospital in the whole of Gaza, despite the fact that it had been already damaged. And so it only had 2 operating rooms, 1 X-ray machine, no CT scans, myself and an orthopedic surgeon and a couple of other general surgeons. And then the air raids were so severe, the number of patients were coming in, that the last day we'd operated for 22 hours nonstop. And then we ran out of everything. I mean, literally, the anesthetist came out at 5 o'clock in the morning and said, that's it, there's nothing, there's no propofol, there's no gas, there's nothing to put people to sleep. And the hospital had to stop. And then I made the decision, well, let me go to the south. At least some of the hospitals in the south would function. And we made that horrendous 8-hour trek, a group of myself, the anesthetist, a couple of the nursing staff. Interestingly enough, 2 days after I left Al-Ahli, the Israelis raided the hospital and arrested Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, who's a general surgeon, who was in an article in The Guardian a few days ago about doctors who had been arrested and tortured, and took a lot of the staff that were left behind. When I got to the south, I went to a couple of the hospitals and I saw my colleagues sitting around because there was no fuel to run the hospital and the operating rooms. There was no medication to give. And I felt that that's it. The problem now was not a shortage of doctors. The problem is that the health system had been so denuded of its capacity that the doctors were actually surplus to the rest of the health system. Even I remember the last night I was in the south, the wounded were being brought in by donkey-drawn cart because the ambulances did not have the fuel to transport people.
Yeah, but I think more than 250 of your colleagues, health workers, have been arrested by Israeli forces. Some of them have been tortured. Many of them, I think more than 180 people are still in custody. How did you avoid this, to be arrested yourself? I mean, just because you went south at the right moment?
I think that's what happened. I think the raid, so it all falls into kind of place. When I did want to leave, the Foreign Office, the British Foreign Office, contacted the Israelis. The Israelis said he's not allowed to leave. Contact us again in 2 weeks. And I felt that there was a decision that with the targeting of the doctors, that I'm on a potential list for targeting. And if it wasn't for the kind of contacts that I had purely by chance, I mean, purely by virtue of the fact that Queen Rania of Jordan and I went to the same school, and we were schoolmates, and my family reached out to the Jordanian royal court that I was able to be extracted by the Jordanian government. That the Israelis did not want me to leave at that time. But when you hear the testimonies in the Guardian article, who interviewed several of the doctors, and when we hear what they did to Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, who's a friend and a colleague who is the head of orthopedic surgery at Shifa Hospital. I mean, Dr. Adnan al-Bursh was arrested and was tortured and died because he was sodomized with a broomstick until his bowels were perforated. And that's how he died. And now his family is just fighting for him, for his body to be returned for burial. And this killing of 950 health workers and the torture is a critical component of the destruction of the health system. You can rebuild Shifa Hospital in 1 to 2 years, but training someone like Dr. Adnan al-Bursh took 12 years. And so when you look at some of the specialties that Gaza needs, there were 5 pathologists in Gaza. There are still only 2 still alive. There are no surviving emergency medicine board certified doctors in Gaza anymore. Of the nephrologists, you know, the kidney specialists, all of the board certified ones have been killed. That intentional systematic killing, which, by the way, there was a biostatistician who looked at this and found that if you were a health professional in Gaza, you had 2.5 times more chance of being targeted and killed by the Israelis than any other profession in Gaza. So it shows that and why this is important is the dividends. When there's a ceasefire and there's no more bombs, you can ensure that the genocide continues because people are still dying. There's going to be dying of malnutrition, dying of starvation, dying of hypothermia, dying of diseases because there's no health workers. The wounded are dying because the Israelis got what they want. They stopped the war, they got it off the TV screens, and they put in place genocidal killing mechanisms that now continue to take people's lives.
So, Ms. Albanese, you have joined us. Do you hear us well? And do we hear you? Maybe not.
And the screen.
She's there on the screen, but and she's also here. Do you hear us? Yes, but we don't hear you. So, is your microphone on or something? Try again. That's a pity because she is a powerful voice, but
can you hear me?
Oops, they will try again, no? Okay, now let's continue together.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes. As you can hear, we miss you here in Geneva. There was a warm welcome that Ms. Albanese, you have been one of the first UN officials to speak about genocide for Gaza. And in this context, how do you qualify what Dr. Al Sittah says? I mean, the systematic attack on hospitals and the killing of health workers and doctors. Is it a war crime? Is it else?
No, it's genocide. It was war crimes before. It was war crimes 2 years ago. You remember, you and I. So first of all, let me start with some good manners. I would like to salute Dr. Abu Sittah. I'm really moved by his testimony, by the movie, and also by the warm welcome I received from the audience. I know why they are so excited about seeing me, because I'm one of the only few Western people, especially in the United Nations, who has the courage to call this a genocide that is happening under our eyes. And no, it's not about war crimes. 2 years ago, I was there on that stage having a very heated debate with someone who was questioning me. And I was told after the debate, well, you're so undiplomatic. Yeah, because the Palestinians have suffered war crimes and crimes against humanity for really since war crimes were codified. And today it's not about talking about war crimes. It's genocide. The Palestinians are being genocided under our eyes in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, because it doesn't matter who they are, doctors, physicians, or bakers, or teachers, or students, or children, 6 months old, 3 months old. They are all targeted for extermination because of this plan of realizing Greater Israel. And while I don't want to entertain any discussion that doesn't start with this, why someone like Dr. Abu Sittah, who's losing members of his families and who has lost so much, why he needs to be the one calling out for justice while it should be us? And I speak especially to the Western people sitting there. And Switzerland has just cancelled the conference of high contracting parties because they couldn't get, because they couldn't get their acts together and talk about the genocide of the Palestinian people. So I don't want to keep on talking about anything else than this. Why are the Palestinians being exterminated?
Sure. What Dr. Abu Sittah said just before you arrived is that he doesn't understand how it couldn't be stopped. I mean, when something like this happens, I mean, people usually react, and there is something going on in the UN around. I mean, the powerful nations do intervene. How do you explain that this has happened for so long?
Look, I have to say that I'm surprised. I've been surprised for a long time because like a few weeks into this, the violent assault that started against Gaza, I would expect a reaction. I thought that in the face of this wild revenge that Israel was unleashing against the Palestinians in Gaza, member states like France, Italy, or Belgium, or Ireland, or all the ones who have always been critical voices against Israel when it exceeded in its violence. Switzerland, for example, I thought they would do something. What does it mean, doing something? At least imposing some economic measures, some military embargo, which is an obligation that has been also reminded by the International Court of Justice. We are not there. We have the European Union, which keeps on trading with Israel. We have the European Union countries who receive Israeli leaders who are wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, almost with the red carpet. So we need to understand where we are. To answer your question, how is it possible? It's because we are still where we were 8 years ago. The Palestinians today are the Jews of 8 years ago. They are not seen by those who hold power. But I have positive news here. And this is something that comes, I've realized it was told me by a rabbi in New York last year. He said, I lost all my family in the Holocaust, and I'm sure that had more people like you been around, maybe you wouldn't have been able to stop the Holocaust of my people, but you would have saved lives. And this is why I need, as a Western person, as a proud Western person, I need to do everything in my power to make sure that this is stopped, that the Palestinians are not erased from their land. Those in the Gaza Strip, those in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, those with Israeli citizenship, and one day the refugees have the possibility to return to their land, which is in Israel.
Dr. Al Sittah, you yourself, how do you explain it? We have seen the images. Maybe 80 years ago, we had not precise information about the Holocaust. Maybe we couldn't see. I mean, they were hiding it. Now there are cameras still in Gaza today, even if journalists also have been killed. But how do you explain that it goes on? I mean, don't you feel it in London when you move in Beirut? What is lacking for a stronger reaction?
I think we need to be very clear about the idea that there's three parties to this. There's the Palestinians, there's the Israelis, and then there's Western imperialism. There isn't. This war has shown that the continuum between Western imperialism and Israel is a seamless continuum. That Israel is an integral part of Western imperialist project in the region, and a settler colony that is related to the West, as all settler colonies were. The West is the metropole. When I came out of Gaza and went into the UK, I realized that the genocidal project was like an iceberg, that Israel is the visible tip of the iceberg, but there's a rest of the iceberg that you don't see when you're in Gaza, which is the genocide enablement apparatus. The BBC, the CNN, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the organizations that have submitted. I mean, I have had 9 formal complaints against me, 2 to have my medical license removed, 1 to have me banned from holding any office in a British charity. When I was elected at Glasgow University, 5 complaints were made against me. There are over 60 doctors in the UK who have complaints against them to have their medical licenses removed. I can tell you that from BBC journalists that I was told from the very time I came out that the BBC has me on a list of Palestinians that are not allowed to be interviewed. And during the war in Lebanon, when I was working in Lebanon, I would get requests from BBC journalists 4 times that would be cancelled within the last few hours before the journalists would show up. There is an apparatus, and there is a direct complicity. When Germany increases its weapons supply tenfold, when the British Air Force takes on the responsibility of electronic espionage over Gaza and overflights, when the Italian Air Force refuels Israeli F-35s as they're going to bomb Sana'a, all of this highlights the fact that the problem is, it's not that there's some kind of misunderstanding, that there is a decision by Western powers that Israel represents a force by which their interests can be protected in the region. And this injection of blind support to Israel during this genocide, in which all of the apparatus of the power in Western institutions were brought to heel to support the genocide, at some point will end. The problem for these political elites in the West, and the only way we can judge popular support, the images changed popular opinion in the West. And we know that by measuring the kind of oppression that's happening in the West. 3,200 university students were arrested in the United States. The UK is now arresting Holocaust survivors, organizers of demonstrations against this war. Germany brutalizes demonstrators on a regular basis. Conferences are being built. The reason why is that the mismatch between popular opinion that's outraged, and outraged not because of Palestine, outraged also because they recognize that the 21st century, if this genocide goes unpunished, will look like further genocides in countries which are much more populated than Palestine, in Kashmir, in Brazil, in Africa, in the rest of Asia. And so people are outraged, and governments are trying to protect the imperialist project by supporting Israel.
Well, this... This very night, this screening tonight, and the debate we have was, I mean, there's a group in the Suisse romande that tried to cancel it because it said it's not acceptable to have this kind of discussion here. So, and it's anonymous, but it's called Collective 7. It's a reference to October 7. But the authorities of Geneva have maintained the debate. So you see, not everybody is like part of a plot to suppress discussion and so no. The question is, now you are in Lebanon and you work there on a daily basis, except when you travel like today. And Israel has been accused to do the same, to target hospitals and doctors. What do you witness yourself there?
So during the war, we witnessed, it now seems to me, and this is again why it's so dangerous for the rest of humanity, it now appears that the destruction of the health system is a central part of Israeli military doctrine. And we saw that in the war in Lebanon. So there was targeting of all of the hospitals in the south, and then targeting of the hospitals in the southern boundary. There was 150 health workers killed in Lebanon, ambulance drivers, paramedics, doctors. There were lots of the field hospitals that had been killed. And so you see this emerging again as a template that the Israelis use. You create a catastrophe. So what manufacturing a catastrophe necessitates a health catastrophe, and that necessitates the destruction of the health system, not as collateral damage, but as a central component of the health of the conduct of war. And we see that. The other thing we saw in Lebanon and we see in Palestine, and which for me it differentiates my experiences in Palestine and Lebanon with my experiences in Syria and in Yemen, and is that settler colonial violence differs from other violence in its almost obsessive need to be performative beyond utilitarian use of violence, that it needs to be gratuitous. Israel needed to target the premature babies in Nasser Hospital and then leave their dead bodies on a stretcher for the ICRC team to see. Israel needed to have that performative violence because the difference between war and settler colonialism is that settler colonialism starts after the land is occupied. And so settler colonialism sees the body of the indigenous population as the battleground. And therefore, it needs to leave its mark, its indelible mark on the body in a kind of performed way that goes beyond what is necessary to gain military advantage. And you don't see that kind of gratuitous nature of violence. You see that in Lebanon, you see that in Palestine. The need to maim, the need to, when you bomb a building, a residential building with a 1.5-ton bombs, when you know that a 100-kilogram bomb would have done the job, it is because you need to perform that kind of violence and to impress on the natives your godlike omnipotence. That's the whole idea of colonialism. And we saw that the brilliance of Trump is he articulates these things, and because he's trying to normalize them. The AI video that he posted is the best articulation of the settlers' need to be seen by the natives as a divinity with total omnipotence. And the bizarre thing, like most serial killers, that they do the killing, but there's a benevolent side of the killing, that it's for the benefit of the victims and the natives, but the natives just don't understand.
Wow. Ms. Albanese, I saw you approving what Dr. Al Sittah said. Still, the UN recognizes that there is a specific kind of targeting of health care, of health infrastructures. I mean, Volker Türk, the Human Rights Commissioner, also even mentioned that there is kind of a pattern that Israel is first attacking hospitals by plane, then with ground troops, and then arrest the people, and then takes them in custody. Is it something you have observed yourself, this pattern of attacking hospitals? I want to take you into health sector because that was the subject of the movie.
Oh, no, definitely, Serge. And I can definitely see that you have not read my last report, Genocide as Colonial Erasure. Because if you had, you would know that I had, no, I'm joking. I mean, I'm really trying to also relax. It's a very heavy discussion and it's painful for me and for Dr. Abu Sittah and for you as well, Serge, and for all us listening. But what I'm trying to say is that the attack of the health system is a script that Israel has tried and tested, probably not intentionally from the beginning in Gaza. But then already in October 2024, I told the members of the General Assembly in New York that the attacks on the health system were systematic in the West Bank as well. So when in March 2024, I wrote my report, Anatomy of a Genocide, which was basically an X-ray of what Israel had done. And clearly, yeah, the attack on the health system, the doctors, the ambulances, the hospitals themselves, leaving wounded and chronically ill patients without the possibility to get help had become a characteristic. But all of a sudden, I realized in the 6 months after March 2024 that the same had happened in the West Bank. So if you look at the numbers, already in October 2024, the attacks on the healthcare system, both hospitals and ambulances and health personnel, was higher in the West Bank than in the Gaza Strip. While, of course, in the West Gaza Strip, because of the weaponry used, it was much more lethal. And again, I agree with Dr. Abu Sittah. This has been a new modus operandi of a war that has been after Gaza, experimented in the West Bank and in Lebanon. And yeah, this is a way to deal with the affected population. So now today, I want to especially because it's the 8th of March and we like talking of women on this day as if we didn't existed on the other 364 days of the year. But yeah. Tell your men to keep the flowers and to make sure that we have our rights. But however, back to Gaza. Yeah. There are 156,000 women who are about to give birth. 156,000. And there are less than 2,000 beds available. This is the result of the genocide. The destruction of the hospitals and the destruction of the health infrastructure, it has happened by design. And so that even if they were not to resume the heavy bombing of the genocide survivors in Gaza, because let's be honest, this is what is left. There is nothing else to destroy other than the physical body of the genocide survivors in Gaza. But even if they didn't resume bombing, people will keep on dying because of what it has been done. And if the aid that has been agreed upon is not delivered and is not being delivered, the effects of the genocidal campaign will continue. And so the genocide, let's understand what is genocide. Genocide is the destruction of a people as such. It's not complicated, in fact, it's very simple. And it will continue until and unless it's stopped. And I agree with Dr. Abu Sittah. There is a complete mismatch between the political leaders and business people and the masses, whom I belong to as a special rapporteur. And so this is the time. I do see this, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening to the Middle East, what Israel is doing as such a slap to humanity, to the human rights system, to the multilateral order, that we need to decide where we want to be. We want to continue as human beings to suffer the repression of bullies, or do we really want to stand up and take care of a system that protects us without killing others? And this is what I think we should all stand for. Mm.
Ms. Albanese, two things. The first is that I read your last report, but I needed you to tell the people what was in it. And the second thing is that it's a question that will make you angry, but I have to ask it. I mean, the Israel keeps saying...
Anti-Semite?
No. Not at all. No, Israel keeps saying that there were structures of the Hamas in the hospitals. There was a tunnel in Al-Shifa hospital that was shown on pictures. I mean, what elements do you have to say this is true, not true, and what can you say about it?
I don't even have to go in there, because simply Israel doesn't have the right to wage a war against the Palestinians, full stop. It's so simple, you know, because Israel occupies the West Bank, is Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. So the only fully lawful thing that Israel can do is to withdraw the troops, dismantle the settlements, and stop controlling natural resources, borders, and airspace of Gaza.
Sure, but Israel has been attacked by Hamas on October 7th. So when they replied, they said Hamas is hiding in hospitals. We have to target hospitals.
Yeah, and Hamas, they had been attacked by Hamas. And so Israel had attacked the Palestinians and Hamas in 2007, 2012, 2014, 2018 throughout the year, 2021 and 2023. So if your argument, sorry, not your argument, if Israel's argument is right, that you can destroy everyone and everything because you have been attacked, then the Palestinians had some reasons to do what they've done, which is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I believe there are rules, and the rules apply to everyone. So while I condemned the killing of civilians, Israelis and Palestinians, so I say if Israel continues to strike preventively the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, this is what they will get.
So we are now above the level of the Al-Shifa hospitals, but Dr. Abu Sittah, did you, for example, had to treat Hamas fighters?
So, first of all combatants, once wounded under international law, have the right to medical treatment. And as a healthcare provider, if I were to refuse that, that would be a dereliction of my duty under the Hippocratic Oath. So we start with that. Two, Israel had arrested the medical director of Shifa Hospital, Dr. Mohammed Abu Sittah, for over 6 months, had no evidence to put him in front of a judge, did not accuse him formally of anything that went on in Shifa Hospital. This is the man who managed Shifa Hospital during the whole of the war. And so it was obvious that from the very beginning, Israel had created this narrative in order to justify what we saw. Having done this for 20 years before this war, I know what combatants look like, what their comrades, the way they move when they're wounded. It's obvious, and it became obvious to me halfway through the war, is that Hamas had created a parallel and separate military hospital system. But what is very important, and we need to go back to Shifa Hospital, that there is the conceptual battle that the Israelis were waging against the Shifa Hospital was this. First of all, that they needed to find an institution to declare victory on. And so they turned it into a military objective, and then they came and they overran it and they declared victory over it. Two, in the second attack on Shifa Hospital, and this is, again, we go back to the need for performative violence. Israel executed 400 health workers and wounded and their families, set fire to the hospital, had not shown a single journalist where these tunnels and these centers were. But most importantly, unlike every other massacre and mass grave, where these 400 bodies were then buried in very shallow graves in the forecourt of the hospital, because Israel needed to turn Shifa Hospital from a place of healing, a hospital, a place of health, into a zone of death, so turning the politics of life, of healthcare provision in a place like Shifa Hospital into the necropolitics of genocidal death. In most massacres we know, the bodies are put in the back of a truck and they are sent to somewhere and they're dumped. And we saw that in Srebrenica, where it took years to find the bodies because they had been hidden. Israel insisted that these bodies are kept in the hospital so that forever the Shifa Hospital becomes a mass grave rather than a place where Palestinian health workers try to defend Palestinian lives against the elimination and the politics of death of settler colonial genocide. And that's what the story between the Israelis and Shifa was. death versus life, the provision of life as a struggle against the necropolitics of settler elimination.
We are now to the moment where the audience could ask questions. On va passer aux questions de la salle. Je vous demande de
I'll turn to the floor for your questions.
des questions courtes.
If I could ask you to put brief questions that are not aggressive. There are roving microphones going through the room. And I would kindly ask you to wait for the microphone and to stand up to ask your questions. Sir, with a microphone, please. Good evening. I don't know whether I'll ask it in French or in English. My name is Samuel Crétenon. I'm an activist. I work on the genocide in Gaza.
Je vais le traduire rapidement, si jamais, mais...
I'll be translating it. But if you could ask your question very briefly, that would be great. I'm very shocked by your questions as a journalist. And I'm very shocked by the media in Switzerland and its position. Their media speaking about the genocide, but these are not the mainstream media. We have a specialist, UN specialist on human rights. We've got a physician. We've got a journalist. What do you think about the stance of the Swiss media with regard to the genocide? RTS, for instance, in Switzerland, does not speak about genocide, whereas it's self-evident. Heidi.news, in December 2023, ran an article about mass rapes by Hamas fighters. We know now that there's no evidence about these rapes. You're the editor-in-chief. How could you let such an article be run on your website with no journalistic evidence? I'm extremely shocked by the work that you are doing in Switzerland.
Donc, votre question s'adresse autant aux...
So I think your question is goes both to Dr. Sittah. I'm not sure whether Dr. Abu Sittah will have an opinion about Swiss media, but for my part, I have to ask these questions. It's part of my work. I'm there to put questions to Ms. Albanese, Mr. Abu Sittah. I'm there to let them speak. I have to ask these questions about Hamas, because it's something that Israel keeps saying. So I do have to ask questions about this. And these questions that might seem stupid enable them to come up with very smart answers. Now, Heidi.news, to come to the second part of your question, has sent someone, it was before October 7th, but we had a report over 20 episodes on Palestine. It was called Palestine, Territory of Humiliation. It was before October 7th, so there wasn't anything about the war in Gaza, but we wanted to understand what was happening on the ground. We spent time there. We sent a reporter there. So I don't think you can accuse me of being biased on this particular issue. I don't remember the article you're talking about. We look at press articles. There may have been such an article, but I don't remember it specifically.
How do you see the work of newspapers, Swiss newspapers, but maybe some others as well? How do you see the treatment by the press of the situation of the genocide?
I think so. The way I see it is this: the peace talks now on Ukraine and Russia are moving to Riyadh. This is because of the failure of the media establishment and the political establishment in Switzerland to defend the human rights as a concept for 15 months. And therefore, it denuded from the position, the moral position that Switzerland carried throughout the 20th century, the 21st century, until this genocide happened. the failure to defend the rule of law against genocide, the failure to defend humanitarian law, international law, by the Swiss government, by the Swiss media, by the Swiss intelligentsia, has betrayed the position that Switzerland has always occupied. And this is why things are moving away to other places. And the reason why there's a surge in the right is because forces of liberal establishment cannot defend liberal values while defending genocide. They can't. And that's what we saw in the United States. And that's what we're seeing here. The failure of European liberalism during this genocide is what fueled the return of the right in the United States and in Europe. The more you give space, the more you legitimize the language of Trump, the more you legitimize the language. So what Trump has basically said is everything that Biden had done is okay and it's normal. That's it. They've captured the space left by these intelligentsia, and they've legitimized it. And now we see that, and now Europe will pay. Europe will pay the price for that failure to maintain the values that had been agreed on after the Second World War.
Une autre question? Une autre question?
Est-ce que je peux intervenir?
Can I answer? Yes, of course.
Allez-y.
Yeah, I think that this is the first time in many years that I've seen a debate, a question being asked to the moderator, which is interesting. But I would also like to say, I mean, Serge, of course, is not against you. There is a sense of frustration toward Western media that is, I'm glad to see being heartfelt among Western people. Because I do look forward, as I've said before, to the day there will be an investigation on the role of the media, corporate media in the West, who have not only in the first days of this genocide, because, listen, I mean, myself, in the first 5-6 days, under shock, because what happened on October 7 shocked everyone, because, of course, we are used to see the Palestinian being slaughtered. The moment I saw myself, Israelis being slaughtered, I have a very strong reaction and I say, what's this bestiality and blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, this is normal. The point is that after those 5, 7, 12 days, no one has really investigated what we were fed by the Israeli government. So while and this is where things have gone completely wrong, because even in Israel, there were journalists from 972 and Haaretz warning about the lies of the government or the military. The Western corporate media have thrived on a life of their own over these lies and never corrected. And on the contrary, they have never taken a stance, vis-a-vis an independent, unbiased stance vis-a-vis what was happening. And let me be very clear, it's not normal. It's not normal that for 16 months, because this has not stopped yet, we have the story of what has happened and what is happening in Gaza on main newspapers and televisions being told by the Israeli army. So, and this is something totally unprecedented. It would be like to give a microphone to Russia to hear about the invasion of Ukraine. So again, I think it's totally fair, and it's not against you, but it's really a general criticism that we need to have against Western media.
Autre question, peut-être.
Another question, maybe here at the front. Thank you.
For your interview, and thank you very much for this moment. I would like to know, I know it's very difficult to see about that, but is it possible to think about the peace? And if it will be, how do you imagine it?
So I think one of the mistakes that the Palestinians have made since 1948 is that they, unlike the South African struggle, they did not center the elimination of the ideology to the struggle, i.e., for South Africans, the struggle was against the ideology of apartheid. And for the Palestinians, the struggle has to be against the ideology of Zionism. Zionism is an eliminationist and now genocidal ideology that aims at wiping out the Palestinian people. And as in South Africa, the minute you agreed that there is no place for the ideology as a ruling ideology, the political arrangement fell into place with ease. What the Palestinians and the Palestinian political elite unfortunately did is it chased the dream of a state, regardless of what the state looked like, thinking that Zionism as a settler colonial ideology is going to live or be prepared to live with the Palestinian state. And as we saw, now it's even against the law in the Israeli parliament to discuss the two-state solution. Peace will come once decolonization comes. Decolonization comes once there is the same way that apartheid was removed, the ideology of separation, of ethno-nationalism ends, and people are allowed to live on the land as equal citizens, regardless of faith and creed and racial background. That's what peace is like. Trying to get into a kind of, you keep this street and I keep this street fails to understand. And you see, the question that's being asked now is, where does Gaza go after the genocide? I mean, for me, the question is, where does Zionism go after the genocide? If you've tried to, that elimination happens, once the elimination happens, where does Zionism go? What is the Zionist concept as a political ideology once the genocide has been tried and tested? Is it more genocide? Is it further in? So the question remains for me, the solution lies in the political ideology rather than in the political arrangements that fall into place once the ideology is sorted out.
Une question ici, madame.
There's a question right here.
Et après, tout au fond, ouais.
And then clear at the back.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I'll put my question in French. I was very moved by your movie. I have a general comment. I have a question for you, Dr. Abu Sittah. What was the reaction of the international community of physicians? I was in Palestine in the year 2000 with a group of health professionals, psychologists, physicians, with Derek Summerfield, a professor of medicine from King's College. And we understood that at the time, the president of the International Doctors Association, Yoram Bashar, an Israeli physician, said very officially that a little pressure on Palestinian patients is nothing if we get information. That's what we said at the time. It's awful to say, but that's what he said. So I'm wondering what international doctors' associations do. At the time, we conveyed the message. I wrote to Geneva. I never received an answer. I called this man out who promoted torture, in a sense. So what's the support you receive from international doctors' associations with regard to what's happening in Gaza? I'd be interested in knowing, have they remained silent or not?
So just to add, in the first 2 weeks of the war, 150 Israeli doctors signed a petition calling on the Israeli army to target Shifa Hospital and to destroy Shifa Hospital. And when we wrote to the British Medical Association asking them to put pressure on the World Medical Association so that at least the Israeli Medical Association censors these 150 doctors who are calling out for the destruction of the hospital, the BMA was silent. What's even worse, and I can only speak about the UK, when Dr. Ahmed Maqadme was executed at Shifa Hospital and killed, Dr. Maqadme was a young, bright plastic surgeon who had won a major international award by the Royal College of Surgeons of England. It took weeks of pressure on the Royal College of Surgeons, and at best all we got was a small announcement, them basically saying that they mourned his loss as if he was run over by a car. The American Medical Association is even worse. The failure of the medical establishment to stand up and for two things: the destruction and the targeting of Palestinian colleagues, whom they do not see as colleagues, but more importantly, that in Sidi Tinman, the internment camp, where Gaza's prisoners were taken, Israeli doctors were performing amputations on Palestinian prisoners. And this is according to Bet Salem. This is not even according to just the Palestinians. And Dr. Muhammad Abu Salmiya, the medical director, said that he had been assaulted by Israeli nurses and doctors while he was in prison. And so this failure and this attempt at completely providing the kind of cover for Israeli medical associations is yet another kind of gap and another failure of these institutions. They've all failed miserably.
Si je peux juste ajouter une chose,
If I may add one thing,
lueur d'espoir, c'est que
just to bring a glimmer of hope, the article that was run in The Guardian that you mentioned is based on a report from Physicians for Human Rights.
24 prisonniers.
They surveyed 24 Palestinian physicians to establish that they had been tortured. So all Israeli physicians, all Israeli doctors are not the same, just to set the record straight.
Oui, voilà, je vais parler en français parce que mon anglais.
My English is not very good, so I'll put my question in French too. I just wanted to clarify things. I'm a Lebanese. I come from South Lebanon. And my question has to do with this. So we see that the siege and massacre of Tal al-Zatar had led to the awareness raising, or to Dr. Abu Sittah's awareness. Do you think that what's happening will be a source of mobilization for the future in the Arab youth? And then my second question is for Ms. Albanese. The Prime Minister of Lebanon, as the former president of the International Court of Justice, what do you think about his departure? And what can you say to give us trust in international law, given the fact that what's happening in Gaza at this stage is the last nail in the coffin?
Sorry, we start with you.
So
The massacre in the South
So, I mean, at the end of the day, so one of the interesting things in Lebanon and Palestine, and I think that probably one of the reasons why we see what we're witnessing is that the provision of healthcare has always been a very central tenet of liberation politics in Palestine and in Lebanon. And it's, you know, since the 50s and the first generation that set up clinics in the camps. The Palestine Red Crescent Society was a founding member of the Palestine Liberation Organization. During the first Intifada, one of the first things that happened is grassroots medical organizations came out to defend the Palestinian people. And I think before we had words for it, we knew that one of the ways you fight against the politics of death, the necropolitics of settler colonialism, is with the politics of life and the politics of health provision. And so that, for me, you know, the two young doctors who were in Tal Za'atar, the doctors who were in Beirut during the siege of '82, the friends and colleagues who set up the organizations in the first Intifada, shaped my understanding of liberation medicine. And liberation medicine is very different than humanitarian medicine. Liberation medicine is about solidarity, not about pity and charity. Liberation medicine is about steadfastness, not about resilience. Liberation medicine is about standing with people, not band-aid medicine while they're being slaughtered. And that liberation medicine, I feel that my understanding of it is very much rooted in the Palestinian and in the Lebanese experiences. It was rooted in the experiences in the Algerian liberation movement and the work of Fanon, and then his premature death almost kind of amputated what was evolving as the role of the giving of life in the politics of death as a resistance to the politics of death.
Merci. Miss Albanese, your turn. You got the question? Yeah.
Yes, but I would like to comment also what was just said. I love the concept of liberation medicine. I never heard it before, but it makes total sense to me. And I see also, probably we should call it the liberation humanitarianism, because it's totally different from what NGOs from the part of the world I come from are very up to, like stepping in once the harm is done and perish the thought they say a word about the harm that continues to be done, because there is Palestine, and this past 16 months have somewhat changed also the way of humanitarianism. For humanitarianism to intervene, it has shown that it doesn't take long, and it doesn't take much, and it doesn't take necessarily extra funds from Switzerland or from the European Union to be human. Because this is what the Palestinians need right now. They don't need money, they need political support, and they need humanity. And so as the BDS movement or the Hind Rajab Foundation are proving, there is so much that can be done without waiting for government's charity. And going to the question I was asked, there is one aspect that should be clarified, and probably I should answer the Serge's question with more legal details. I'm not questioning and I'm not challenging that Hamas might have used hospitals or other civilian buildings for military purposes. What I know, based on data, based on statistics, based on previous attacks, is that Israel has often used this argument of Hamas using hospitals and civilian premises as human shields. And these have always been challenged, even retracted by Israel. Again, there were several commission of inquiries by the United Nations in 2008, 2012, 2014, and also Amnesty International reports. So this is an argument that Israel always makes. But while, of course, a civilian object, including a hospital, loses its protected status when it's used for military purposes, Israel has an obligation to still, again, if the attack on Gaza was lawful, and for me it's not, but even if it was lawful, it's not that you can destroy a hospital in its entirety, because if it was at a certain point used for military purposes, you know, and in any case, even if and again, it has been for Al-Shifa, it was clearly proven as a construction or a lie made by Israel, but also the medical personnel and the civilians in there do not lose their civilian status. So what was the reason for killing and torturing, arbitrarily arresting and detaining Palestinians, patients, and medical personnel? So it's much beyond that. So again, it cannot be justified in any possible way. Now, going to the question, look, I think that basically there has been a departure from international law over time that has manifested in its brutality over the past 16 months. So international humanitarian law has been completely scrapped. And this is something, this is where I look at Switzerland with a sort of sense of interrogation and saying, hello, are you the custodian? Or, I mean, it's the host of the ICRC, the most neutral state in Europe. So what is about the protection of those very rights and tenets of international humanitarian law that have been crushed in Gaza? But however, do I have trust in the system, and how do we build on it? I do have trust in the system. I still have trust in the system. The point is, who are the guardians of the system? Because the political establishment in the West has proven unable or unwilling to take care of that system. And not all is lost, because as we speak, we see members from the global South, South Africa, Namibia, Colombia, Brazil, Belize, and many other states rising up to expectations, including of us in the West, and taking genocidal states and states complicit with genocide to the International Court of Justice, activating investigation and prosecution, starting sanctions and arms embargo. So I think that we are witnessing a complete shift of balance, where the West, unfortunately, is become more and more irrelevant, but other powers are rising to shelter and to shield as much as possible the multilateralism system that has been sort of hijacked for the past decades for imperialistic interests.
Compliqué de vous dire que l'événement touche à sa fin.
Well, unfortunately, I'm the one who's going to tell you that time is up. I know that many of you may still have some questions. And of course, if our guest and the filmmakers remain after the session, you can continue the discussion informally in the cafe. But unfortunately, we are going to have to leave the room. I know that many of you still have questions, so I'm very sorry about that. And thank you so much to Dr. Ghassan. Thank you, Francesca, as well.
Thank you, Muna. Thank you, Carol, for being there with us. It's a real honor.